We'll go right into our next and final talk. So I'll introduce our speaker, Paul Libanati. He's a rising senior at Vanderbilt University studying biomedical engineering on the pre-med track with a minor in philosophy. His Benedictine high school education first instilled in him a profound love for both the sciences and the faith. Although he intends on pursuing a future in the medical field, he always seeks to discover new ways to wed his faith with the science he practices. He would like to thank Dr. Len Goodman, Dr. Michael Staron, Mr. Robert Alspaugh, and Dr. Andrew Suker for guiding his interest in philosophy. And today he'll be talking to us about evolution and Christian belief.
Hello. So before I jump into my presentation, I just wanted to say how thankful I am to be here and to be among all of you, and what a witness you all are to living out the faith in the sciences, and how inspirational that is for an up-and-coming scientist like me. And I'll also just mention that that being here as an undergrad and giving a talk to all of you, especially having sat through all the other talks and basically hearing the ideas that I will iterate in this talk being spoken about in detail with other speakers has been kind of funny and humbling. But yeah, no, I must feel akin to how a child might feel telling a nuclear scientist, giving him a talk about his favorite color, But I hope that out of this presentation you get a little more than the fact that my favorite color is in fact blue. So also just to start out, kind of mentioned in my biography, but I really am deeply indebted to let's see if this works. Oh, there we go. Yes. Oh, yes. I'm a pre-medical student at Vanderbilt studying biomedical engineering and philosophy. And I really am deeply indebted to my high school religion department, and specifically for instilling in me a great love for the Catholic intellectual tradition, which really served as my catalyst for pursuing a minor in philosophy in college, and also additionally for pursuing research on the intersection of science and religion under the tutelage of Dr. Len Goodman, who is a faculty member in the Vanderbilt Department of Philosophy. And just on the subject of creation and evolution, throughout my high school, I never actually saw any conflict or anything that would suggest that there was reason to reject one and claim the other, and that they could coexist totally peacefully. But after moving to college in Nashville, I discovered the continuous resistance that among several Christian groups to accepting evolution. And then, again, during my research with Dr. Goodman, we read Father Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's book, The Phenomenon of Man, which to me, I perceived it sort of as an attempt to make faith more applicable to a scientific audience. So given my cultural context, I decided to, in my research, do basically the inverse of what Father Chardin had done, and to try to make evolution more applicable to a religious audience, particularly those more hostile to accepting evolution, by highlighting the often overlooked support that evolution actually lends to Catholicism. Just as a disclaimer for my talk, I will not be addressing topics such as scriptural interpretation or biblical literalism or anything like that, both of which have already been the subject of much scholarship, which I am woefully underread and underprepared to address. So rather than breaching those topics, I'll just simply hope to demonstrate the spiritual beauty that evolution adds to my beloved faith. So just a little table of contents of what I'll discuss today. First, I'll address two major objections that exist within Christian circles to the embracing of evolution. Next, I will argue that the understanding of evolution actually draws us deeper into an understanding of God through his natural revelation. Then I will propose various ways in which evolution lends support to Catholic values surrounding the family, sex, and human sexuality. Just Total giveaway, I'm a huge GP2 fan, so that definitely influenced me a lot in what my thoughts on that. So, and then finally, I will demonstrate that evolution provides support for Catholic efforts to increase stewardship and care for the environment. So, the first objection that I will address is that evolution limits God's creative work by allowing randomness and natural selection to usurp his creative and generative powers. Now, some philosophers and theologians have argued against this claim by ascribing a semi-deistic quality to creation. They propose that evolution should be understood as the actualization of divinely instituted latent potencies. God ultimately authored these potencies at the moment of creation. However, evolution serves as the mechanism through which they are reduced to act within the context of time. While this view does restore God to the throne of created causality, through it, God appears to remain aloof to the creation, to his creation, beyond his initial involvement. Indeed, it causes God only to appear present to creation at the very beginning, before immediately handing creative reins over to natural phenomena. To me, this view seems deistic and rather simplistic. Now, by investigating the nature of God, we can arrive at new alternative understandings of evolution, which, rather than isolating him from creation, highlights his perpetual proximity. Borrowing from the theology championed by St. Thomas Aquinas on the divine attributes, God's transcendence and immanence imply that he exists outside of his created space-time continuum, while simultaneously remaining profoundly present to it at each moment of its existence as its active creator. From this transcendent perspective, evolution loses its linear form. What once appeared as the temporal progression of changes in species development becomes momentary expressions of divine creation, all beheld at once. Creation becomes a beautiful mosaic of both the living and the extinct, all sustained by the same creator, and evolutionary history just becomes the unfurling of God's perpetual act of creation witnessed in time from our linear perspective. Therefore, by viewing the history of the universe through this perspective, evolution fails to overthrow God's creative and generative nature. Rather, it simply becomes a linear historical perspective of the vast array of moments of divine creation present, of divine expression present in creation. So on to the next objection. Another concern often leveled against evolution is that it degrades man by placing him on the same level as the rest of creation. Rather than being the object of special creation, as indicated in sacred scripture, man merely becomes the byproduct of natural phenomena paired with differential survival and reproduction. However, in response to this objection, I propose a frame shift in how one might perceive man's origins, that is, man's origins as proposed by evolution. Rather than degrading man, the theory of evolution can be interpreted as promoting man's unity with the rest of creation. As such, it can be better understood as an uplifting of the material world. As an uplifting of the material world and non-human organisms to the dignity they deserve as man's co-creation. Additionally, evolutionary theory does not degrade God's creation of man. In fact, I would claim that the humbler our origins, the more miraculous our creation. God's act of animating the material and then ensouling the organic inspires no less awe than the biblical allegory of breathing life into dust. The only difference between these two is that the former actually deepens man's relationship with the birds of the air and the fish of the sea, over which God gave him dominion. However, despite this increased proximity to creation, man's uniqueness from creation still remains clear. Indeed, man as God's image bearer remains set apart from the animal kingdom through his unique powers of intellect and volition. Nevertheless, it is clear that our evolutionary history only draws man into a deeper relationship with the world he inhabits. Now that some of the major objections to evolution have been addressed, I will consider how evolution can be used to support a deeper knowledge of God himself. So drawing on the idea of God's divine immanence to each moment of creation, any perceived moment any perceived evolutionary change, when viewed from a non-transcendent perspective, actually highlights a new, unique aspect of divine expression. As such, evolutionary history can be thought of as a kind of natural revelation. Just as an artist is known through his work, so too, through the study of evolutionary history, can we better understand the Creator through his creation. Additionally, and this is breaking a little bit into what Father was getting into in his homily during the Mass this morning, so you smile as this light came up. Further contemplation of the nature of God reveals that all of creation can also be understood as an outgrowth of Trinitarian love. In God's very nature, we see the generative nature of love, of his divine love, in the love between the Father and the Son, from which proceeds the Holy Spirit. Indeed, whenever God creates, he also loves. Therefore, through the study of evolution, we can analyze the material expression of divine love itself. An even more astounding realization occurs when we remember that we are image bearers of God, and that by learning about evolution, we can learn more about ourselves, the generative potential of our love, and how it allows us to participate in God's divine nature. Now, to discuss what I just mentioned, we will consider how evolution reinforces the Christian and Catholic consensus on the importance of marriage, the family, and chastity. First, looking at Catholic social teaching on marriage, biology informs us that through sexual selection, through selection of mates, a sexually reproducing organism influences which genes persist in a gene pool and which go extinct. By the principles of evolution, one individual's sexual selection is not only tied to their immediate offspring, but also their community and their species through their genetic contributions to future generations. Prudent mate selection ensures that one's genetic information will be paired with another's fit genetic information, which will precipitate in that genetic information's continued promulgation. While other animals are driven by instinct to select for apparent biomarkers of good health in a partner, humans, as the only truly autonomous organisms and rational organisms, exercise free will and intellect in choosing mates. Thus, by using these powers, we can consciously determine the genetic makeup of successive generations. When we utilize these powers to influence the genetic makeup of our progeny, we participate in God's masterpiece of creation. Indeed, just as we can uniquely contribute to Christ's salvific work through redemptive suffering, so too can we uniquely contribute to God's creative work by exercising our godlike powers in prudent mate selection. Thus, the powers with which humans were endowed, as being made in the image and likeness of God, allow individuals to act as minor co-authors in God's creative drama. In the words of Sophia from her talk yesterday, God has created us to be his collaborators. Even more than that, because God reveals himself in creation as an artist reveals himself in his work, we have not only become a co-author in the history of creation, but we also contribute to God's self-revelation of his creation by consciously altering it. Evidently, evolutionary principles seem to reinforce the importance of prudent choice of spouse in marriage. Now we'll turn to evolution's implications about the importance of Catholic social teaching surrounding the family unit, specifically through ensuring survivability and reproductive success of both progenitors and offspring. Evolutionary analysis of the family demonstrates its advantageousness in helping to ward off predators, facilitate collaboration, and to provide care for the elderly, young, disabled, and infirm. Such protection correlates positively, believe it or not, to increased survivability and reproductive success. However, in modern times, where animal predation has grown rather obsolete, the family serves as a support system through which its members can weather tragedies and stressors, and it also provides essential cultural and social education, which is key for offspring survival and reproduction in modern human societies. Furthermore, evolution explains the functional advantage of the Catholic model of monogamy for offspring survivability and flourishing. By observing the evolutionary history of humans, we can observe that we have developed a type 1 survivalship curve. This implies that human populations tend to experience low death rates among individuals of the same generation, of the same generational groups at early and middle stages of the population's maximum life expectancy. However, generations experience a dramatic increase in mortality rates as they near the age of population life expectancy. Now, just from my biology class, I learned that organisms with a type 1 survivability curve often require immense early parental investment in a relatively low number of offspring to ensure optimal survivability. With other species, such as insects or mollusks, they trade high parental investment for a large number of offspring. Now, humans forfeit this large litters for increased parental investment and longer lifespan. In order for this parental investment to be given properly, it requires parents to dedicate much of their energy and attention to their offspring. Monogamous pairings best facilitate this by allowing two individuals to invest heavily in their progeny rather than having to split their time among members of their community. Swans, along with many other species of birds, provide non-human examples of the survival benefits of monogamy and parental investment. Therefore, I argue that the evolutionary function of a monogamous family structure demonstrates that its practice confers a reproductive advantage to offspring. Now, to wrap up my discussion of sexual ethics, I will touch on the evolutionary function of the virtue of chastity in ensuring proper parental investment and preventing evolutionary irresponsible childbearing. Now, before getting into the idea of chastity, I think it would be helpful if we think about it through its opposite, or its inverse, which is promiscuity, and the effects of promiscuity on parental investment. Firstly, both male and female promiscuity may cause childbearing to occur during a period of life when circumstances render it difficult, if not impossible, to have intense parental investment. One example of this can be seen in teen pregnancies, where teenagers have their first child before they are employed, can properly support a child, or can dedicate the necessary time and energy to fostering its development. In such circumstances, reproductive success of the child and the child bearer themselves as well is lowered, as they are not able to raise their child with the optimum amount of parental investment. Likewise, promiscuity decreases paternal parental investment, as a father would have difficulty knowing with certainty if a child is his or not. Investing time and energy in a child that is not one's offspring becomes evolutionarily disadvantageous, as it prevents the man from investing his energy in his own child, and in pursuing a mate for the bearing of children with his genetic information. As a result, increased promiscuity would likely result in decreased monogamy and parental investment, as fathers would be less likely to risk expending energy and resources on children that may not be their own. Therefore, chastity is important for both the reproductive success of offspring and for that of their progenitors. Additionally, the coevolution of the orgasm and human sexual reproduction could be used to demonstrate the functionality of religious teaching, which designates masturbation and pornography as immoral acts. Sexual orgasm and sexual reproduction are evolutionarily coupled for the sake of increasing the human desire to reproduce and promulgate genetic information. Herein, we observe the orgasm's role in promoting sex's procreative end. However, in addition to this, the effect of the orgasm on promoting social bonding between participants can be understood to serve the function of emotionally binding the two individuals conjoined in the sexual act, and thus increase the chances of monogamous pairing. Herein, we observe the orgasm's role in promoting sex's unitive end. Therefore, the coupling of these events, There we go. Here we are. Therefore, the coupling of these events as occurred, here we go. Now we're good. All right. Therefore, the decoupling of these events, as occurs in masturbation, could have grievous consequences for the reproductive future of the species by altering human post-sexual behavior. And this is something that I discussed with Sophia as well after her talk on neuroplasticity, and the reality that our actions actually influence who we are and our behaviors, and whether or not we are able to live out virtuous lives and as God intended us to. So, and that, of course, having implications for parental investment, and as I said, all of the survivability and reproductive success of humans. Indeed, such decoupling would allow for the experience of sexual pleasure without the sacrifice required for parental investment and child rearing. As a result, actual sexual encounters that result in procreation may become rare, which I'm no expert on this, but from what I have seen in, I guess from news outlets and social media, that it is a reality that my generation is actually engaging in sexual activity less than prior generations, which I think is interesting to note. Now, pornography likewise causes the decoupling of the sexual act with its evolutionary co-partner, the orgasm. Additionally, it also has the evolutionary disadvantage of promoting promiscuity and masturbation, which we have already demonstrated to be evolutionary disadvantageous practices. So in this way, evolution provides support for the functionality of upholding chastity as moral law. Now, to end with a quote from C.S. Lewis that kind of reiterates what I've said, masturbation sends the man back into the prison of himself, there to keep a harem of imaginary brides. And this harem works against his ever getting out and really uniting with a real woman. Among these shadowy brides, no demand is made on his unselfishness, no mortification ever imposed. Certainly, such a state is not conducive to the sacrifice necessary for proper child care and family life. And I'll also just say that much of what I've said here seems to be specific to men, and I acknowledge that this is also very true for women. As a man, though, I just have more experience with men, so please forgive me for my limitations. Finally, I'll just conclude with looking at evolution's insights into our role in preserving the environment. So evolution's uniting of man and creation lends much support to religious thought on our moral obligation to respect the environment. Especially now, when a lack of stewardship contributes to the destruction of entire ecosystems, humanity needs a reminder that we are inextricably tied to the rest of creation. From nourishing foods to tenacious guard dogs, nature has and continues to play a critical role in assisting our survival. Out of respect for this interdependence and following our God-given duty to tend to our garden home, we have an obligation of stewardship for creation. Evolution's demonstration of man's kinship with the natural world is parodied throughout sacred scripture and Catholic tradition. Scripturally, this is supported by the biblical creation accounts that claim that God formed man from the clay of the earth and breathed into him the breath of life. Not only that, but it is also supported by God's commands in the Garden of Eden to tend to the garden and to look after it. This obligation is further expanded upon within Catholic tradition by numerous theologians, perhaps most zealously by St. Francis of Assisi, who in his Canticle of the Sun illustrated our unity with creation by using titles of kindred to refer to the sun, the moon, and other natural beings and phenomena. Finally, turning to the topic of biodiversity, not only can it be argued that ecological diversity is important for our survival, but also, in the light of everything I've mentioned before in this talk, the great diversity of nature serves as a material manifestation of God's self-expression in the natural world. Therefore, it could be argued that by maintaining biodiversity, we respect God's desire of how he would like to be naturally revealed to us. Now, this brings me to the end of my presentation. However, I hope I have convinced you all that evolution can be demonstrated to bolster and deepen Catholic spirituality and moral dogma. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, John Paul. I think we have time for a few questions.
Thank you. This will be short. I'm just wondering I thought your synthesis of all of those thoughts there was quite good, and I'm wondering if you are planning to publish this anywhere, because I would love to be able to figure out how to work this into my classes at a secular university.
My goodness, what a compliment you have paid me. I had given some thought to it, but to be quite frank, I felt like it was pretty like low-level philosophy work, so I really didn't think about it. But now that you've given me that exhortation, like, yeah, I'll go for it. We'll get it done this summer. Let's let's do it.
It might seem low-level philosophy to you, like you're familiar with Catholic philosophy, but to people who have no idea.
All right, I'll do it. Thank you.
Yeah, John Paul, this is great talk. Do you have any suggestions, because you're in a unique position with a lot of professors here, for what professors could do to say, to what inspired you to keep your faith through college? And do you just have any words of wisdom for us along those lines?
Do I have like another 30, 40 minutes? Or oh, there's so many things I could tell you. I could speak from my own experience and really tell you that I said at the beginning of the talk, I am really indebted to some figures in my life who, rather than dismiss the hungry questions that I had for the faith, really took the time to explain them to me. Yeah, like I remember having, I guess I won't mention by name so I don't embarrass him, but one of my teachers would I would go to him after class and we would talk for hours, and he would often make his I guess what is the word I'm looking for? He would often sigh and huff and be like, blah, 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 you know, but he would always explain things to me, and he'd always take the time to do it, and he would always do it with that spark in his eye, and never fault me for asking, never be like, it's too complicated for you to understand, which, to be fair, another professor who I did mention, who I am thankful for, had the habit of telling all of us in our class that we were idiots and we didn't know anything, which is actually, I think, possibly a good way to promote humility in but seriously, I mean, I went to a private Catholic all-boys school, so there was a lot of ego, so it was good to have that reminder. Yeah, no, really, I would say accompaniment, but I feel like that's just a good rule for life, you know, just accompany your students well, love them well, and listen to them. So, and thank you all for all of you who already do that. I mean, it's amazing, and you guys have like a really unique position, especially now when the family's under attack, and you know, you professors kind of have to step in sometimes to fill in the gaps.